Today, I'm going to share with you the different stages that occur in young children as they develop an efficient pencil grasp. Encouraging a good pencil grasp includes much more than just learning to hold the pencil. It includes developing core strength, crossing midline, bilateral coordination, shoulder stability, arm and hand strength, along with finger dexterity and finger isolation. So there's a lot going on. You should remember that encouraging a wide variety of different fine and gross motor activities is one of the best ways to promote good finger and arm strength for handwriting in your child. The fisted or palmar grasp pattern develops between around ages 1 and 2 years old, and it refers to the palm of the hand being used to grasp an object, in this case a pencil. So if your child is using a fisted or a palmar grasp pattern, you can encourage them to use a more functional grasp by breaking crayons in half. Using smaller writing tools rather than a full-size pencil or a big thick marker can really help. Typically, the fisted or palmar grasp pattern accompanies the scribbling stage. Scribbling movements are typically initiated by the shoulder and the elbow, which involve larger muscle groups and a relatively low level of precision. The digital pronate grasp typically develops between ages 2 and 3 years old. During this phase, the child is beginning to place the fingers in a downward position on the writing tool, but all of the fingers are being used. Digital refers to the fingers being used to grasp instead of the entire palm, and the term pronate refers to the wrist being turned down and away from the body. This is considered a transitional grasp pattern and is typically present when little ones are learning to make lines and circles. And during this phase of development, coloring and early drawing movements still come from the larger muscle groups and typically involve large strokes. The static tripod grasp begins to develop between ages 3 and 4 years old. This positioning includes the index finger and the thumb with the writing utensil resting on the middle finger. The rest of the fingers are tucked into the palm. And static refers to the way the child moves the pencil, specifically meaning that they use the wrist and forearm to move the pencil instead of the fingers. The fingers are primarily still or static during coloring or drawing activities. And the static quadrupod grasp is similar to the tripod, but there's just one extra finger pinching the marker. Instead of 3 fingers, 4 are used. The static quadrupod grasp is just as functional and age-appropriate as the static tripod counterpart. A dynamic tripod grasp pattern usually develops between ages 4.5 and 5.5 years old, if not older. This is the most functional grasp pattern possible. And dynamic means that the movement for the pencil or marker come from within the fingers, with support from the wrist and forearm. It is no longer a large, clunky movement of the arm. This dynamic grasp allows for more precision and detail during tasks such as coloring within the lines or within smaller spaces, drawing with more detail, or tracing or writing letters with more precision. And having a dynamic quadrupod grasp again means that there is just that one extra finger pinching the marker and is considered just as functional and age-appropriate as its dynamic tripod counterpart. In summary, when the dynamic motions of the fingers take over, whether using 3 fingers or 4, is generally when a mature grasp pattern upon the pencil has been established. Starting at just a few months old, babies begin developing the skills they will later need for handwriting. As children develop and mature, they're better able to isolate out small movements of their hands while stabilizing their wrist, forearm, and upper arm at the shoulder. They are also able to move one side of the hand separately from the other, giving each side of the hand its own unique function. Grasp patterns generally fall into 3 basic categories: efficient, inefficient, and immature. You want to be careful not to confuse an immature pencil grasp with an inefficient one. Children should generally move through the developmental process of managing a pencil before they're ready for handwriting. The open web space is a circular shape that is created between the thumb and index finger, when properly holding a pencil as shown here. This open web space is what gives the fingers on one side of the hand the freedom to make their tiny little movements independent of the rest of the hand and arm. The following photos are examples of some inefficient grasp patterns commonly seen in young children. What all of these inefficient grasp patterns have in common is a tightly closed web space. When the circular web space is not present, this necessitates large movements of the arm and inhibits small, refined movements of the fingers. If your young child is using an inefficient grasp, it may be a result of taking on too much too soon. It's best to intervene before these grasps become a fixed habit. Once the writing demands increase and children are expected to write more, an inefficient grasp can take its toll. This kind of grasp can make writing slower, more effortful, and sometimes painful. It can be stressful to the joints of the hand to clench a tool so tightly, often contributing to tired and achy hands, not to mention unhappy young writers. Early practice may result in poor pencil grasp, especially if children are writing with implements before their hands are ready. If a young child is using an inefficient grasp, you may want to modify the tool, the grasp pattern, or the activity. You don't want to reinforce an inefficient grasp pattern by encouraging the child to keep writing and coloring with the implement in an inefficient way. The longer an inefficient grasp is present, the more difficult it can be to remediate. Typically, after late first grade or early second grade, motor patterns, such as writing with a pencil, are fairly ingrained and can be very difficult to change. Don't be surprised if you see your young child switching between different pencil grasps. As the shoulder and arm muscles become stronger and steadier, you should see your child switch less and less. We can liken this to a baby learning to walk. When his legs are tired of walking, he will go back to crawling. But as his endurance and skill improves, he will walk more and more. So don't discourage your child from going back to an earlier grasp. Instead, promote correct pencil grasp development and endurance by working on the underlying foundations for good fine motor skill development.